Well, hello everyone, and welcome into another episode of the Payne and Drain Show. My name is Zach Payne. With me is my co-host Alex Drain, following yet another dominant Lions win. Alex, how are we feeling today?
Pretty good overall. That was the least stressful win of the year. The Titans game, at least, if you remember, that first quarter was a little dicey for a little bit there, and then things spiraled out of control. This game was pretty much over from the jump. Not much to stress about. Pretty good feeling. 9-1 on the year, and things just keep chugging along.
Yeah, I remember like watching that game. The Jaguars scored, they got a field goal in their first possession. And I remember looking after it's like it took them 9 plays to go 29 yards to get a 58-yard field goal. It might be a long day for them. And lo and behold, it was. Although, much to my surprise, and I think everyone's surprise, Doug Peterson remains employed? Question mark? Like,
At least for now. They've got a whole
yeah.
bye week to do it, but it definitely felt like this was going to be a Monday morning situation, and right now it's Tuesday at 2 o'clock on the East Coast. So I don't know. Maybe he's survived another week. I don't really know.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see. So this episode is going to be structured a little bit differently because we don't have as much to talk about with the game. So we are going to do a lengthier segment around the NFL, do a Contenders and Pretenders segment in a bit. Make sure you follow the show before we get into it. You can find us on Twitter at Payne and Drain, me on Twitter at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. Now, as always, we will start with the Lions game, and we'll start on the offensive side of the ball where yeah, that was quite the bounce back for Jared Goff, coming off of 5 interceptions, and he has 400 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and a perfect passer rating. Yeah, that'll do.
He has to be the first quarterback in NFL history to have 5 interceptions followed by a perfect passer rating in the next week. It has to be.
That's an ESPN stat if I've ever seen one. Like,
so Yeah, I would say he's more than likely the first to ever do that. It was a great game for him. I don't have a ton of notes other than pretty much everything he wanted, he was able to get. He had the first touchdown to Amon-Ra was in a tiny window. Second one was a pretty tight window as well. He hit both of those. He moved in the pocket decently well. The only interesting thing is maybe he's becoming more mobile. He had a couple runs in this game. He had one throw on the run as well. If you watch the Campbell post game, uh, whatever you call that locker room video,
yeah.
he emphasized, I think it was 4 rushes for 18 yards in rather humorous fashion. But I don't know. Maybe he's exploring using his legs a little bit more. That's the only note I have, really.
I think he's a lot more willing to just take it. Like, if he has 5 yards in front of him, he's a lot more willing to take it compared to years past. I don't think you're ever going to see him do like the old Matt Stafford lower the shoulder every now and again. Throwback to that Titans game from years ago where he just absolutely ran over a defender. But
Yep.
no, Goffel, he's the ultimate take what the defense gives you. And if the defense is giving you 6 yards on the ground, you take 6 yards on the ground. I don't know. Like, there's and some of those throws. I also want to highlight the throw to JMO on the crosser to start the second half. That's also not exactly a wide open throw. Obviously, JMO breaks away for a long touchdown after the fact, but that's all because that throw is perfectly on time in a relatively tight window, catches JMO in stride, and he's able to take it the distance. Like, Goff was just he was back to what we've kind of grown accustomed to since about week 4, which is he was just on one. His accuracy was as good as it can be. Like, right now, I don't know if you can name 5 quarterbacks that are more accurate than him. The way he's been playing, he's just been on an absolute heater. Part of that is also because he had more time to throw. The offensive line, Taylor Decker comes back, and they have a much better day protecting him.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I think he's just navigating the pocket better in general too. Like his
Mhm.
step ups were really good in this game, so give him credit on that. But overall, most of this is just the fact that the Jaguars did not really cover anybody. They
No.
didn't get a lot of pressure. They just, I don't know, looked like a team that has already decided the season is over because this was pretty darn bad.
Well, it's definitely over now, as they said at 2-9. The Lions 9-1. They achieve a winning record in back to back or in 3 straight years for the first
Three
time
straight.
in how long? 50 years.
I think no, I think they did it 93 to 95, so
Oh, okay.
30 years.
It's
Yep, they
hardly an improvement, but
yeah, so other offense notes I had wasn't really a ton to talk about. JMO deep cross touchdown, Brock Wright gets a touchdown. Believe Amon Ra was 11 for 11 in this
yep,
game. He had that streak of 30 for 30, so we're back on a streak there. Outside of that, Gibbs had a great game.
yep,
That bounce touchdown where he spins off the pile was neat. That
yep,
little orbit screen down the sideline for a big game was cool. He almost broke it for six,
yeah.
but he got tripped up right at the end. Uh, Otherwise, not a whole lot else. It just was such a comprehensive beatdown. I guess we could talk about garbage time. So Hooker looked decent, had some nice throws.
Yeah, he had one nice throw to Khalif, I believe. That was the one that ended up setting the franchise record for yards. I guess that's the other thing. The Lions, they set a franchise record for most yards in a game with 645, 640 something. Uh
645.
yep, a franchise record for the largest margin of victory at 46, beating I believe a 2011 beatdown on the Chiefs that was 48-3. And they tied the Titans game from week 8 for the second most points scored in a single game in franchise history with 52. Yeah, that'll do. That'll do. It is arguably the best offensive performance in franchise history. So, and considering Hendon Hooker and the backups played for about 10 minutes there at the end of the game, like that's just it's ridiculous. And Craig Reynolds had a few nice runs as well. I think genuinely my only criticism is that like Penei Sewell played the whole game after getting banged up a little bit.
Yeah, that was the one like uh-oh moment when he was a little slow to get up,
Yeah.
but he ended up being fine. Yeah, the Reynolds run was nice. Uh Baki had a 7-yard run. That was
Yep.
about all I had on him. Hooker 3 of 4 for 37 yards, and the one incompletion was just a stone hands drop from
Yeah.
Allen Robinson
Robinson,
on a
he
little.
saw the defender coming and panicked.
Yeah, that was because you watch it and you're like, oh, almost had it. Must have gotten jarred loose, and then you watch the replay. And it's like, no, he just like, straight up dropped it. So that's not great. But overall, just a dominant day. I mean, the whole time it was going on, I was just sort of thinking, what is the franchise record for yards in a game?
Yeah.
Because they got to be close. And didn't you say it ended up being the fake spike game? Was the
Was the
record for
other,
yardage?
yeah, that had been the
Yeah.
previous record. It was like 620 something. I guess another note is the Jags had I think 176 yards in this game. So the yard disparity in this game was the largest in like 50 years of the NFL.
Yeah, I think they said 44 years, something like that. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
the whole box score is an all-timer. I
Yeah.
mean, 8.5 yards per play, 3.6 yards per play for Jacksonville. I mean, first downs, 38 to 10. 38 first downs.
Yeah, that's slightly good. Like that's
Touchdown
just
7-0.
yeah,
Just
touchdown
a
every single
massacre.
drive except for the kneel
Yep,
downs.
yep. And
Absolutely insane.
Jack Fox never got to punt. This is one of the most lopsided NFL games I've ever seen. Probably you'll ever see. Fun for the people that were there, at least.
Yeah. The Lions now no NFL team aside from the Lions has a victory by a margin of 38 points or greater. The Lions have 3 this season.
Pretty good. On defense, do you have any notes on defense?
Shout out Kirby Joseph, now leading sole possession of first place in interceptions. I don't know what
That was a
Mac.
nice one too.
Yeah, it was a beauty. I don't know why Mac Jones thought throwing downfield to a backup tight end in against Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph was a good idea, but I mean that was just perfectly like Kirby baited him the whole way. It was very reminiscent of the interception he had against the Titans, where he's just reading Mason Rudolph the whole time and baits him over the middle. Like he had that thing labeled the whole time, and the second that throw came out, it's like his eyes lit up. He was just ready for it. So good for him on that one. Aside from that, I thought Terrion had a pretty good game. He like although. It's kind of hard to grade because I think he got beat on one by Brian Thomas, but there was three other ones for sure that it's like, okay, Terrion has good coverage, but the throws are so uncatchable that it's kind of hard to even give him credit.
Yeah, the Jags came out really dinking and dunking like that first drive. Everything was 2, 3 yards through the
Yeah.
air. And then you're like, well, that's kind of lame. And then you start thinking, okay, well, is there a reason for this? And then every time Mac Jones threw down the field, you're like, well, that's the reason. Because
Yep.
these balls were not even close. Just way out of bounds, way too far. Just a rough day from him. I do want to give a shout out to a Mick Robertson. Had a missile tackle on a slip screen, just coming firing down. They also had a sequence in which it went from 2nd and 1 to 4th and 2, which kind of encapsulated the day for Jacksonville. But always hype when you can do that. They rested Carlton Davis because of the thumb situation.
Yeah, he broke his
second half.
I think broke his thumb in practice last Thursday. Just threw a cast on. He'll play through it. He'll probably have the cast on the rest of the regular season. So yeah, anytime you can give him a couple plays off, do it.
Yep, and they played Kendall Vildor in his place. Didn't notice a ton from him. Zadarius Smith got a sack towards the end of the game, kind of a combination sack. That's about it. I mean, defense was fine against an opponent that wasn't really trying. So
yeah, like coming off of the second half against Houston, they carried that momentum very nicely into this game. ETN did pretty much nothing on the ground. Jack Campbell got credit for half the sack that Zadarius got because like you said, everyone got there. The only note is I'm a little I'm not actually upset, but I'm a little annoyed that it was Vildor that came in instead of Rakestraw because I want to see Rakestraw play. I want to see the kid get some chances because he had that one. I don't know if it was his only defensive snap, but against the Packers where it's pretty much perfect coverage and Jaden Reed just makes a play. Like that'll happen. So I want to see more Rakestraw. Not necessarily down the stretch, but in games that are a little bit more out of hand. I don't know. There's not a whole lot to say about this game. I don't know if you had any game theory notes or special teams thoughts. Jake Bates had another 50-yard field goal, I believe.
Yep, 54-yarder. This one wasn't as tight to the posts, but made it still the same. Nice to see that. Jaguars kicking 59-yarder on 4th and 2 on their first drive was pretty
pathetic.
Much the white flag.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's possible to have a sad field goal on your first drive, but that was pretty close.
I tweeted out at that point, I'm like, first of all, like, good kick, but I think Cam Little is his name. Great kick. But it's 4th and 2. You're playing against, after as the results of Sunday, the number one team in the NFL, and you're not even going to try to go for it on 4th and 2. I thought Doug Peterson was supposed to be this go for it, aggressive, gambling type of coach.
Well, not in this one. My only other note, Lions challenged a bomb to Brian Thomas that was dropped in between Dorsey and Brandon Joseph, which...
Gluttony. Pure gluttony.
Yeah.
Yeah, man,
I don't know who the Jaguars version of Chris Christie is to complain about lack of class, but
I'm sure. What's the owner's name? Is it Shad Khan?
Shad Khan. Although I did see Jags fans online like begging the Lions to run it up so they can
fire.
So.
Yeah, I know. I was tweeting out during the game. I was like, look, the Lions are destroying the Jags, and this might be the best thing to happen to the Jags this season.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this is almost timely now, but wind the clock back 4 years, that Thanksgiving game against Houston. I mean, we were all, at least I was, cheering for Houston to destroy the Lions, to fire the Patricia Quinn partnership, and it worked. So, uh, if the Jags fans are all on that bandwagon, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, not a whole lot else to say in this game. It's the first game in a long time that when the challenge happened, I was not watching live. I had fully switched over to Red Zone at that point. I was like, well, if anything happens, I'll come back and watch it on replay. But I almost always finish the Lion game in full before I move over to other games. But this
No
was
need.
legitimate college football garbage time against a FCS team sort of game. So you don't get many of those in the NFL, but pretty nice to be on the winning side of one of those.
Yeah, exactly. I did. I guess the last note is there was a poll from The Athletic that's about a year and a half old, heading into the 2023 season last year. The Athletic ran a story that was like, who would you rather be, the Detroit Lions or the
Oh yeah,
Jacksonville Jaguars? And it wasn't unanimous, but a good healthy majority said they would rather be the Jacksonville Jaguars because of the quote unquote stability at quarterback. And it's very ironic to look back now. Not that, like, Trevor Lawrence is a fine quarterback. I don't think he necessarily has been put in the best situation. And Jared Goff, by contrast, has been put in a very good situation. That being said, it is so funny to see the directions that these two teams have gone since then. The Jags have now completely bottomed out, and the Lions are they are now the Super Bowl favorites as of
yeah.
recording this. Like,
Yes, I saw the Twitter poll of that was like 67-33, I think, Jaguars, and I was scrolling through the like replies, and all of the comments about I'm choosing the Jags because of the quarterback is like I don't know, it's such an example of things that are wrong with NFL discourse generally.
yep.
Like we've just become through like the ESPN and the clickbait social media, Stephen A. Smith industrial complex have become so focused on turning this into like an old-fashioned NBA sort of thing, where it's like the teams don't matter. The only thing is, do you have good quarterback, right? Do you have great, that sort of thing. Like we've tried to turn it into the football version of LeBron versus Steph Curry versus whatever, where it's just an individualistic game. And the fact that you have across the league really a story of outside of basically what the Ravens and the Bills this season is really about teams, right? Like Patrick Mahomes
Has been
hasn't been very
very
good.
mediocre, yeah.
Yeah, and the Chiefs are winning because they have a great defense and they've got a lot of other pieces. And the Lions and Eagles and Vikings those are the three top records in the NFC. All of those were teams that at different points in time people were like, "Oh, they don't have the right quarterback, blah blah blah." And the number of those guys, certainly Hurts and Goff, are playing well, but they're also just great teams. Football is a team game. There are more players than just your quarterback, and you can look at the Chargers. Like Justin Herbert's been Justin Herbert, pretty good player for a while. What changed is he got a team. He got a defense around him.
Actually, I don't
There's
even know
more
if
to
that's true. He just
football.
got a coach.
He got a coach, sure. Certainly a defensive coordinator. So there's more to football than quarterbacking.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there is. Yes, it's the most important position, but it is not basketball. There
Yeah.
are more factors involved, and I think hopefully more teams we see with these sort of dynamics of team play will get people off that thinking. But it is remarkable just to see how far the Jags have fallen. Bummer for them, but at least they still have some core players. They have Lawrence signed. They need a fresh set of eyes to look at this roster, both in the locker room and the front office, and hopefully for their sake they get it.
Yeah, I think the on the ESPN Stephen A. Smith Industrial Complex, I think his name's Nick Wright, had a segment on the Lions where he's like, I don't know if you can win a Super Bowl with a civilian at quarterback. And I have from this past Sunday, I have a phenomenal Steelers and Ravens games to show you. Like, to everyone that thinks that all you need is the best quarterback in the league, I have an MVP level quarterback that just failed to put up more than, what was it, 10 points or something Or no, they put up 16, but they failed the worst 2-point conversion I've seen in a while.
Yep.
The Steelers are the funniest team in the league, though. They have 2 separate wins this season where they did not score a touchdown. Chris Boswell
They
and a
have
dream.
they've brought the Iowa mold to the NFL. What can you say?
Yeah,
Um,
I respect it.
One note we should talk about quickly coming out of this game: Alex Anzalone is
Okay, yeah,
injured, and they have signed David Long Jr., not the cornerback, not the Michigan alumni, the other one, a linebacker. I don't remember what college he was from, but this is an interesting pickup. Like, this is a higher caliber of player than you usually find on the sort of
Practice
waiver
squad,
wire
yeah.
scrap heap. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have. Do you have any takes on like what he will bring to the Lions?
I don't know him off the top of my head in terms of
Yeah.
like the specifics of his game. What I do know is I believe he was a captain coming into the year for the Dolphins,
Yep.
and then things went very poorly, ended up being demoted. So that alone is unusual, especially because he had 113 tackles last year. PFF grades for the previous 3 seasons look pretty good, and then they just kind of cratered this year. So I
Mm.
don't really know what happened to cause that, but again, this is a different kind of player than you usually find in the mid-season scrap heap. So I'm intrigued to see what he can bring. I think the Lions are in a fairly decent spot at linebacker. Like, that was the position on defense where I think they were the most insulated from an injury because Campbell has played really well and because Malcolm Rodriguez has had a really nice season. So I don't anticipate Long to usurp that, but he's a nice body to bring in, and I think it's a good buffer to have between your sort of your starting two and then your Nowaskis and Ben Neiman's and JRM, guys that are more versatile, more special teams oriented. So I think it's a nice pickup overall. We'll see what he can do. Maybe they can fix him, get his head back on straight, and he can give them some rotational snaps at some point.
Yeah, and I'm sure he will. Reeves Maben is on IR. Anzalone, we think it'll be 6 to 8 weeks, I think was the timeline with a broken forearm. So you're looking at a end of the regular season slash playoff return. If the Lions get the 1 seed in the first round bye, you would expect Anzalone to be okay for the divisional round. Just gonna have to play it by ear though. Then yeah, we'll see what David Long brings. We'll get into some other injury updates for the Lions in a little bit. Do you have any other Lions related takes before we move on?
No, not really. The only one I have is the continued progression of their DVOA numbers. And if you saw Colton Pouncey, I think it was retweeted the DVOA guy. I don't remember what the stat exactly was, but it was like Lions, are now through 10 games tracking as one of the like 8 greatest teams in history, along with the '07 Patriots and '91 Redskins, et cetera. And all the replies are just like, no, don't tell us this. we don't want to hear it, which is very fitting. But I don't know.
uh,
I think this is one of the greatest teams of all time. Probably not yet. I mean, they have to prove it, but their metrics are really impressive, and there's no way around that. They have really dominated the games they've played. The ones that they've been the worst in from a yardage standpoint are the ones that were heavily score effects influenced, like the Packers and Titans games. Otherwise, they've outgained their opponents consistently. They've outscored them by a mile. Their average margin of victory, I think, is now up to 15.9.
NFL average is about 10 points, by the way.
Yeah, I mean they have just dominated these games. So it's really impressive. It's a really strange world to be living in, but for now, at least until the playoffs, I think we can all be rather serene. The stress will
Yeah.
set in then, but I think as a fan base, just have to enjoy this ride for now.
Yeah, like literally the Lions' downside right now is a wild card team. That is the worst case scenario as we enter week 12, which pretty good spot to be in. Like even like the Lions have a couple of tough games down the stretch, and the Vikings have a rather soft schedule. So there is still a chance that the Lions don't end up winning the division, but regardless, I mean, look, if the Lions go win 14 games and then go on to win a Super Bowl, we can have those conversations about where
Yeah.
this team ranks as the one of the greatest of all times. But for now, I'm not gonna get too far ahead of myself. We still have to get there first. I know that Lions fans have been waiting a long, long time, but it's almost weird because you have the Lions fans who are like, "Oh no, we're almost like we're peaking too early. Like why is this happening? I don't like we're gonna choke in the playoffs." And then you have every other fan base that's like, "Look at the Lions, man. Look how good they became."
Yeah, it's I have two other notes. There was in a group chat I'm in the other day, someone was talking about like I'm really worried we're going to be the 2022 Eagles, and people were like, "You mean
Mm,
the 2023 Eagles that peaked too
or
early?" And it's
yeah.
like, "No, I'm talking about the 2022 Eagles, the ones that waltzed to the Super Bowl but then lost it." And we're like, "You're worried we're going to lose the Super Bowl?" Like if that if that's our worry, then we're in good shape. The other note, this is the first 9-1 start through 10 games for the Lions since the 1934 season. Do you know the significance of the 1934 season off the top of your head?
Was that the last time that Detroit won a league championship?
No, they won championships in the 50s.
Oh, okay, okay.
1934 was their first year in Detroit after moving from
Oh,
Portsmouth, Ohio. So, 90-year arc to get back to this point.
wow. This franchise has quite the sad history. This like unironic. Like, look, we can talk about like we joke about. Oh, we'll talk about where this ranks in NFL history. This is setting up to be the best season in team history since Bobby Lane was in town.
Yep, since at least the 50s. That's a long, long time. But
Yep.
anyway, enough stalling. We've been grasping at straws for things to talk about after that game. We have a special segment now.
Yeah. So at this point, we are going to move into our contenders and pretenders segment, a little bit more league wide focused. And we can, if there's any notes from Sunday and Monday night, Thursday night you want to bring up from the slate of games this week, we'll bring them up as we talk about the teams that played. Now, for this, we're going to go through both conferences, starting with the AFC, then we'll move over to the NFC. The only three teams at the top that I'm excluding from this are the Chiefs, Bills, and Lions, because I'm pretty confident in all of those being contenders. So we'll run through the teams that are currently in a playoff spot and then the teams that are competing for a playoff spot. Anyone that's more than 2 or 3 games out, I excluded. But we have a good list of teams. And so we'll start with the AFC with a team that is coming off a very impressive win that we alluded to earlier. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who are just destroying any semblance of narrative that they might be a little bit cooked. Mike Tomlin putting on arguably his best coaching performance to date. The Steelers currently leading the division. How are we feeling about Pittsburgh?
This is maybe the hardest one because they're 8-2. You kind of have to say they're a contender, I feel like, at this point, especially when they beat a Ravens team with good underlying numbers. But I really, really want to see that 3-game stretch in December where they play the Eagles, Ravens, and Chiefs. Like that will be, by the time they get to the playoffs, once they've gotten through that, we'll have, I think, a good idea of what this team really is. For now, it's still in that middle ground where, they've beaten the Broncos, they beat Falcons, they beat Chargers, beat Commanders, beat Ravens. Like that's impressive. They have 5 wins over potential playoff teams. Like, credit to them. I just want to see them play the especially the Chiefs. Like that's one I want to see. Eagles as well. I'd love to see them play the Bills, for example. Just a team that
Mm-hmm.
I'm really confident is a contender, just to get a good measuring stick. Because yes, they have the really good defense. That's a good thing to build on. I still just don't really believe in the offense. I know Russell Wilson's playing decently well. George Pickens is good. Their running game's okay. Najee Harris, powerful back, can fall
Mm-hmm.
forward, get you short yardage gains. I just don't know. I guess I will say contender just to give them credit for an 8-2 start. They're leading the division. They've got upper hand in that quest for the moment. But I have still a lot of unease about calling them a contender.
My unease strictly comes down to the quarterback position because,
Yeah.
for as much as we talk about quarterback it's not basketball, it's not you don't need to have an elite quarterback. You still have to have stable quarterback play to make your offense go.
Yep.
And there's something holding me back. I don't trust Russell Wilson. Justin Fields got benched for Russell Wilson after a 3-0 start, which should tell you all you need to know. Even though I was not a fan of that move personally, I can't argue with the success that Pittsburgh has had. So I'm kind of in the same boat where that stretch in December is that is where my opinion is subject to change. For now, I'll lean contender, I guess, just because I think that we've seen the Chiefs ride to a Super Bowl strictly off of defensive play and very little offense. So why can't the Steelers do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not saying that they will, but they have a chance. If they could shut down Lamar Jackson, who is pretty like a shoe-in for MVP as of now, who can they not shut down?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I will say the good thing about the Steelers, I guess my U.S. Thanksgiving resolution is I will watch those 3 games they play in December against real teams. To this point, I have artfully avoided watching the Steelers. It's when they had that, I think it was Monday night against the Giants and Sunday night against the Jets. I had them on, but I was trying not to watch because so many of their games are just such a slog, and I avoid watching it. But when they play the good teams, I will watch those games, and we'll see what I think at that point. But they're a hard team to get a feel for.
Yeah, and I certainly misread this team because coming into the year, I did bet on them to have a losing season for the first time in the Mike Tomlin era. Woof. That is one of the great gambling whiffs that I've had in the last few years. So, Steelers, all credit to them. Mike Tomlin, probably going to win Coach of the Year if it's not Dan Campbell. So, good for them. We'll see where it goes. Moving on to a recent Lions opponent, the Houston Texans, who are just this enigma of potential that hasn't seemed to take off quite yet.
I think I'm leaning pretender here. They're gonna make the playoffs. They're gonna win this embarrassing division. I just don't know if they have it. You watched that game last night against the Cowboys. Yes, they end up winning by 24, but it wasn't a particularly inspiring performance.
No.
It was tight for a while, even though the Cowboys were playing super rush. It really didn't kind of get blown open until the end of the game when one of the better circus plays of all time unfolds with
a double fumble,
the rush fumble. Yeah, picked up by the offensive lineman, then ripped out and run in. Goofy game, but just didn't give me a lot of faith. Their weapons are scary, and we've seen them have moments where you're starting to think okay, this team, they could do it. They beat the Bills at home. They came really close to beating the Packers on the road. They came really close to beating the Lions at home. They've shown they have the potential there. The weapons are there. If Stroud picks up his game, he's good. Their defense has some players. I do believe the pieces are in place, but just watching them, they don't have any dog. That's my take of this team. The talent is there. There's just something missing from a intangible standpoint. They just don't seem to have the killer instinct this year that you're gonna need. It just at the moment where they're gonna finish, they're gonna have to win at least one road game against Buffalo or Pittsburgh or KC, and probably 2 to make the Super Bowl. And I just look at the team, and I just don't think they have that in them right now.
Yeah, so I agree that on the premise that the talent supersedes what they have done as a team so far this season. I will say I would be much more comfortable calling them a contender now that Nico Collins is back.
which is fair.
because the Nico and Stroud connection was they were lighting the world on fire to start the year. And then Nico goes down and the Texans offense becomes a lot more stagnant. It's a lot less explosive, and it's like now that Nico's back, I'm willing to wager that the Texans will look a lot better offensively. As Will Anderson gets healthy, then the defensive line should look a lot better. I don't know. Like as it stands, they're probably going to be the 3 seed, probably. Um, or no, the 4 seed.
No, they'd be the 4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, 4 seed. And if they're the 4 seed, you get probably the Chargers in the wild card
Or
round,
the or the Ravens.
or
One
the
of the two.
Ravens. Which one of those I'd feel a lot more comfortable than the other. Look, Baltimore. Like we've seen Baltimore play against the Bengals a couple of times, where Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow just go crazy. Would you trust Stroud and Collins to lead the Texans to 28 plus points against the Ravens right now?
Not right now, but I do think they have it in them.
I think that's what it comes down to. I think the potential is there. I'm like right on the fence, but I'll lean. Eh, no, Stroud hasn't had it this year. Honestly, literally just for that second half against the Lions, where Stroud kind of blew that game. Pretender. If it was rookie year,
Fair enough.
if Stroud was playing at the level he was last year, I would say contender because he was absolutely lighting the world on fire. But this year, bit of a sophomore slump. Not that he's been bad, he just hasn't been the superstar MVP candidate that everyone was projecting him to elevate his game to. So I'll lean pretender just because even if you play the Chargers, right? Let's say you host the Chargers, you beat the Chargers, and your upside is going to Kansas City or Buffalo. And I don't think that
The
Stroud.
tough path.
Yeah, they probably have the toughest path of any AFC division winner for sure.
Yeah.
So I'll lean that way. Moving on to the Chargers. This is a very weird. This team over the offseason didn't really do a whole lot except for hire Jim Harbaugh. And suddenly they are looking very comfortably like a playoff team. It just shows what good coaching can do for you. I know people in Chicago are kicking themselves over this. So I don't know what to make of this team, honestly.
Well, who could have seen coming that you hire the guy who has had pretty good success everywhere he's ever coached, that they would have success? Like it. And especially like at the start of the year, you set out, you look at the schedule, it was pretty foreseeable they could jump into a playoff spot. I think even given that, they probably exceeded some expectations. Their defense is really good. I mean, that's the greatest testament to coaching because it's not like they added a ton of defensive pieces in the off season. They just made a coaching switch, and Jesse Minter, who coordinated one of the best statistical defenses in college football history last year with Michigan, is now coordinating a defense that is allowing 14.5 points per game, and that's coming off a game where they finally looked to portal a little bit in that second half, where the Bengals were able to move the ball on them. They've got a really interesting matchup coming up this week against the Ravens. Then we see them at Atlanta, followed by at Kansas City. I think that 3 games is going to be a pretty good test for us, but I don't think they have probably what it takes to make a deep run this year yet, just because of where they're at with their skill position guys. I think Lad McConkey was a heck of a pick. I liked him at Georgia. Thought he was a good draft pick for them. He's had a nice season. The other receivers just aren't there yet. Dobbins is fine. I will go pretender in the sense that I don't think they're going to make the Super Bowl. I will say I will hedge it by noting that I think they are a strong contender to pull off a upset. Like they to me remind me of the Rex Ryan, Mark Sanchez era New York Jets, where it's like, does this team have 2 or 3 upsets to reach the Super Bowl in them? No, not really. Do I think they can go on the road and upset a singular team and go to the AFC Championship game? Yes. That's where I'm at with this team. Like, I think individually they are a scary matchup because they have a good defense, they have a really good quarterback, they're really well coached. They can absolutely be a team that goes in there and stuns Buffalo on the road or stuns the KC on the road. I just don't know if they have all the pieces to do it. Potentially have to do it 3 times to make the Super Bowl.
If the Chargers beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, there's a statue of Jim Harbaugh being built outside SoFi. Like that singular event would create thousands of Charger fans that don't exist right now. So that like we would spawn a new era of Chargers fans, which would be absolutely electric to see, ironically. Like look, my thing is I love Justin Herbert. I think Justin Herbert is the new generation Matt Stafford, where he just needs a decent team around him and he can do the rest. I think he has the capacity to elevate the offense to a higher level in the playoffs. Unfortunately for him, basically the only playoff like record or playoff game he's been a part of, the Chargers blew like a 27-0 lead to the Jaguars. Which doesn't reflect well on him at all. But I'm a big Justin Herbert fan, so I do fully agree that they can surprise some teams. Yeah, I'd be comfortable saying contender. I'll go a little bit more aggressive with it because, look, I see a lot of similarities to the Bengals teams that went on these kind of Linsanity runs in the playoffs where it like obviously they don't have a Jamar Chase, which affects things, but they are a better coached team. I don't think Zach Taylor's a particularly great coach. He's a fine coach. Jim Harbaugh has the potential to elevate the other aspects of the roster. I think the offensive line is better. Joe Alt, I think, is their rookie tackle, playing spectacularly so far. He has been the best rookie offensive lineman by far. Should be getting some offensive rookie of the year conversation, honestly. I'm pretty sure like his first, what was the Chargers' first game? I have to go back and look, but he faced a gauntlet of edge rushers to start the year, and he held
against
up
the Raiders. Yeah, he faced Crosby week 1,
and he gave up like 2 pressures that whole game. So yeah, starts against Max Crosby, Panthers, whatever. Then TJ Watt, then the Chiefs, like, and he's held up. Like, and I think Rashawn Slater is the one on the other side, another very good tackle. And I remember he was in the same class as Penei Sewell, and for like 2 months, everyone was like, "Wow, Rashawn Slater's better than Penei Sewell." Then he got hurt last year, which kind of made people forget about him. But very good. Like, they have 2 really good tackles. They have a solid run game. They have good enough receivers. I think Ladd McConkey will have a legacy game at some point. Defense has some real talent on it. I could see this team genuinely like going to the AFC Championship. And once you get there, who knows? Who knows?
That's a fair take. I think we're close to agreement on that. Just a little differing on the labeling, but they're a dangerous team.
Now, moving on to another team in that division, the Denver Broncos, who have also exceeded expectations. And the key difference is they have a rookie quarterback in with Bo Nix, who has really been on a tear the last couple weeks. He has looked really good. I'm going to start off saying, look, I like Denver, their outlook for 2024, pretender. But they are a team that very quickly could become a contender with the talent they have. If you get another good receiver in there to help Bo Nix, if you can get a legit, like, really good edge rusher to kind of help that pass rush just a little bit more, you have Pat Surtain, who, for my money, is the best corner in the league. You have some other good play, like Riley Moss is playing really well in that secondary. You're getting some decent safety play. The Broncos are a team that I think will become a contender very soon, but they're not quite there yet. Like, because they make the playoffs, they're playing against Buffalo, probably. If not Buffalo, then they're playing the Steelers or /Ravens on the, like, And they already got killed by the Ravens this year. I don't love that outlook. They did go toe to toe with the Chiefs. Arguably should have beat them. Stupid George Karloftis with or no, Leo Chanel with a beautiful field goal block. But yeah, Broncos, great outlook, just not there yet.
Yeah, I agree with that overall. I will note that that Chiefs performance was impressive, and we have to be put on notice a little bit from that and blowing out the Falcons, who I don't think are that great, but that's still something to note. They're in a groove right now, and their losses have mostly been by pretty close margins. 6 points to Seattle, 7 points to the Steelers, 7 points to the Chargers, 2 points to the Chiefs. It's really just that Ravens blowout that stands out. But yeah, I still think it's probably a little early. A good defense mixed with a QB playing pretty confidently is nice, but they don't really have the running game necessarily. And beyond Cortland Sutton, I'm a little iffier on some of their receivers, so it just feels a little early. But give them credit for a really good season so far that has really certainly exceeded my expectations.
Yeah. Now, I am skipping over the Ravens because I'm pretty comfortable saying they're a contender, even though they're in a wild card spot right now. Like, they're a very good team. They're going to be in the mix. So,
Yeah, I definitely call him a contender because of Lamar. I will note that his playoff record is
not
a
ideal.
little questionable. A little questionable at this point. He's got to deliver some wins at some point in the playoffs to cement a legacy. That said, he's certainly good enough to do it at some point, so I think it's a pretty easy contender choice.
Yeah. So now moving on to the AFC teams that are in the hunt. This is where we have some interesting teams. First up, the team that we'll talk about later in the show, anyways, the Indianapolis Colts, who bench Anthony Richardson for the season, but then, oh, just kidding, it was just a few weeks, comes back and actually looks a lot better as they adjust the offense to play to his strengths, running more RPOs, running like just shorter concepts that allow him to get some easy completions. He goes 20 for 30, three total touchdowns. They beat the Jets. Jets defense is not, the unit that they were in the past couple of years, but they're still a top half of the league defense. So impressive performance there, but yeah, no, don't buy it. I don't buy it.
No, I mean this is a pretty easy pretender, even just for playoffs to me. I mean maybe they could backdoor their way in somehow, but it was encouraging for Richardson performance. I think that bodes well for their future, obviously, which is what the focus should be. At the end of the day, they still beat the Jets by 1 point on a fourth quarter drive. All you really need to know about that is that line right there. So,
Yep.
moving on.
I'm going to lump these last two together because they're kind of in the same category of teams that have a good quarterback, pretty good quarterback for one of them, good quarterback for the other, good offense, questionable defense, Dolphins and Bengals. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs. I think if the if the Bengals were healthy and made the playoffs, they'd have a better chance. But now that DJ Turner has also gone down, not great. Not great.
Yeah, the Bengals, I think if they had managed to pull that game out on Sunday night against the Chargers, or the one the previous week against the Ravens,
Either Ravens
then,
game, yeah.
Yeah, we could be having a different conversation because if they're 5-6, and then they've got a Cowboys, Titans, Browns little run there, and then you get a home games against Steelers, home game against Broncos, which could be extremely important for tiebreaker. I think there's be a legitimate path, but
Yeah.
it's now getting harder and harder to see because
They pretty much
feel
have
like
to
they're
run the
probably
table.
gonna. Yeah, and as we remember from the Lions season of 2022, this is the NFL. Unless you are the best of the best, saying we've got to win the next 6 games is pretty hard to climb. You're gonna have off games, so this doesn't feel like they have the math anymore. Like their talent level is still there. The defense is problematic. Honestly, I think in the long run, perhaps getting a new coach, getting a higher draft pick could be better for them just to kind of reset as a franchise. As for the Dolphins, they only have 6 losses, so that's better, but they got games in Green Bay on Thanksgiving. I don't know temperature projection in Green Bay, but the temperature projection here in Michigan for Thanksgiving Day is not very warm. We know what Tua's stats are outdoors in the cold. That one doesn't feel great. They also have to go at Texans, home to 49ers. Again, feels like a math problem here. So
Yeah.
They're not a bad team, but just doesn't feel like it's happening.
Not a bad team, but they're not running that table. And even if you could drop one of those games, you're not only losing one probably in that stretch. I would be eternally grateful if they could beat the Packers, but
I'm all for it. But Tua in the cold in Green Bay,
yeah,
not betting on it.
Not great. So moving over to the NFC now, starting skipping over the Lions because again, Super Bowl favorites, which is a real sentence I'm saying. Philadelphia Eagles, who after last season, they were the biggest paper tigers in football. They go into the playoffs, they get smoked by the Bucks. This year, they figure out, hey, this Matt Patricia guy, not good. So they've started to figure things out on defense. Quinyon Mitchell's playing outstanding right now. Jalen Carter, very good in the middle of that defense as well. Things are clicking for the Eagles. They're coming off a big win against the Commanders to secure the first spot in the NFC East for now. How are we feeling about Philadelphia?
They're a contender to me. I still have some suspicions about the vibe situation. I still have suspicions about Nick Sirianni and whether he has it in him. That said, they're a really talented team. And they're 1-6 in a row. They're 8-2. You have to say they're a contender. I think they're probably the biggest threat for the Lions in terms of getting the number one seed. I'm interested to see this next little stretch here because they've got the 6-game winning streak. It's mostly come against unserious teams. Mm-hmm. Browns, Giants, Bengals on the road, I guess, was more challenging. Home to Jaguars, at Cowboys, and then home to Commanders. That was a stretch where a good team has probably got an expected win-loss of like 4.5 wins. So they outperformed it a bit, but it was an easier stretch. Now they've got at Rams, at Ravens, cupcake in the Panthers, but then Steelers and at Washington. That's the stretch that will give us a better read here. All that said, again, they are a contender. I don't think there's any question about that. They're outgaining opponents by 106 yards on average. I think that's the best in the NFL at the moment. Their point differential is pretty good, outscoring the opponents by 8 points on average this year. This is a good team. No question about that. They're a contender to me.
Should also note that Saquon Barkley is playing like the best running back in football right now. He's been spectacular. Should probably going to win Offensive Player of the Year. It's him or Derrick Henry at this point. So just based on how those awards usually go, I think and I'd even go one step further. The Eagles might be the biggest threat to the Lions in the playoffs, in terms of their path to the Super Bowl. I would not be shocked at all if this was the NFC Championship, Lions-Eagles, which, I mean, would be a good game.
A good game.
It'd be like, you would think the Lions would be slightly favored in that game, but it sure would not be a cakewalk. Like, the Eagles they are built every bit as completely as the Lions, if that makes sense. Like the Eagles have as well-rounded of a roster as the Lions. Like the Lions, maybe a little bit better in some areas, but Eagles a little bit better in some other areas too. Like that's a title fight. That is a title fight. Those are two teams who, especially without Aiden Hutchinson, that is deserving of an NFC championship right there. So that's going to be interesting to watch their trajectory over the last few weeks. Hopefully they drop at least a game or two in there to help the Lions maybe secure that number one seed in the bye, but we will have to see. Moving on to the NFC list is going to jump around a little bit because I'm just going through division winners and then wildcard teams. So this is going to get weird because now we jump to the Arizona Cardinals, who, look, I like the Arizona Cardinals. I'm a big Kyler Murray fan. Love him. I don't know if there is a world where the Arizona Cardinals can really hang with any of... I mean, like, they kept it relatively close against the Lions in week 3, but they also got killed by the Commanders. They've had a couple of... they did beat the... I don't know. They're a very Jekyll and Hyde team. I just don't think they're quite there yet.
No, they're not a contender to me. They could very easily win this NFC East, not East, NFC West.
West.
Who would have thunk that this Sunday's game, Arizona at Seattle, would be a marquee matchup for playoff positioning? I mean, I think they've done a great job to get to this point, and because of their schedule, they can absolutely win the division. They've still got Patriots and Panthers on their schedule that can get them to 8 wins. Then you've only got to scratch out a couple more against the other opponents, and
Yep.
boom, you're there. So I think they can absolutely get in, but it's hard to have watched that Packers game or the Lions game where the Lions were pretty firmly better, even with Goff still being pretty choppy. They got killed by Washington, lost to the Bills. This team, I do not think they have the capacity to win 3 games and make the Super Bowl. But nice story, positive year of progress for their franchise. I think from their standpoint, if you can close out this division, win your home game, that's a successful season.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and anything else that happens is gravy.
Yeah. So, yeah, I like they will benefit if they win the division from at least a decent playoff scale. I mean, like the NFC is not quite as top like the AFC has some legit heavy hitters in the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens. Like the NFC, you have the Lions, then you can say the Eagles as well in there. And then it's a whole lot of teams that are good but not great. So I like maybe there's a path to them winning two games. There might be. I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe.
So I guess they probably have to play the Eagles round 2 though. So maybe not. Moving on, the NFC South, which has we thought was pretty comfortably going to be the Buccaneers division. Bucks end up dropping a couple games to some really good opponents, and the Atlanta Falcons exist.
Well, they are 6-5, but they are our Pythagorean theorem sorcerers of the year. 6-5 with a minus 30 point differential. I They have a +4 yardage differential per game. This is basically just a mid team that has played like a mid team in terms of their results at 6-5. They just managed to get an easier schedule, and they've been able to win the important games against the Bucks twice in pretty close fashion, but that nailed down the tiebreaker, which is hugely important for them. And then you look at this schedule, they could get smoked by the Chargers, Vikings, and Commanders, and it may not matter because they get the Raiders, Giants, and Panthers in the other 3 games. They have the tiebreaker over the Bucks, so if they get to 9 wins, that requires the Bucks to get to 10 wins, which means the Bucks would have to finish at 6-1. Kind of hard climb there. So I think the Falcons are still the clear favorite in the division to win it. I don't believe they are much of a threat to do anything after that.
No. Like, look, I'm looking at that week 14 game in Minnesota. Kirk Cousins revenge game, please. Aside from that, look, I love Bijan Robinson, very good player. Drake London, very good player. Kyle Pitts is the unicorn that has never quite broken out after that rookie year. They have some nice pieces on defense, but just not it.
Nope.
So is moving on to those Vikings, the 8-2 Minnesota Vikings, who for some reason I don't know what it is, but there's something holding me back here because we talked about this when the Lions played the Vikings, how Brian Flores, this defense, it preys on younger quarterbacks that haven't been around the block. And Sam Darnold has not looked very convincing the last few weeks. I don't know, man. This is weird. They're the biggest threats to the Lions in the division because the Packers are sitting at 7-3 right now. Lions have effectively 2.5 games on them. The Vikings, rest of the season, they've got Bears this week, in Chicago, versus Cardinals, versus Falcons, versus Bears, at Seahawks, versus Packers, at Lions. They have so many home games down the stretch. What the hell? But they've got their divisional games. They got the Seahawks, and every team aside from the Bears that they're playing is in a playoff spot, and the Bears are divisional games, which are always close relatively. So I don't know, man. There's a chance that they drop a couple of these, but there's also a chance that they just randomly run the table.
Yeah, they're not running the table. I mean, they they're not going 15-2. There's going to be some losses in there, but I will say it is set up decently for them. I mean, the games I'm watching for them are the Cardinals game, Falcons game, and Seahawks game, just because those are the games we've talked about are older quarterbacks that have been around a little bit more that can maybe figure out the defense a little bit. Whereas like that game week 17 against the Packers, I just feel like their defense is made just designed in a lab to give Jordan Love 60 minutes of hell with his turnover prone, just kind of willy-nilly throwing the ball around
He did
style.
throw he threw like 400 yards and 4 touchdowns the last time they played. I know it was mostly score effects, but
Well, and there were also turnovers in that game too, right?
yeah.
Like that is he had 4 touchdowns, 3 picks. Like that's kind of feels like the Packers thing against this team. It's like either big play or turnover. Um, and obviously they have 2 games against the Bears. The Bears aren't that bad, but again, this defense feels like it's made to gobble up Caleb Williams. Personally, just looking at this matchup, so there are still very winnable games for them. But once they get into the playoffs, I just don't know if they have the quarterback play, if their defense can hold up against a team like the Eagles, against a team like the Lions. Like those are the questions. They're going to have to win at least one of those games, possibly 2 to make it to the Super Bowl. Just don't I just don't feel like it. This is a good team and the coaching job they've done is magnificent. They have a very bright future if JJ McCarthy can hit a higher ceiling than what Sam Darnold offers. I just get the sense that they are a little bit of a paper tiger, but they're definitely good enough to win at least one playoff game against teams like the Falcons or the Cardinals or whoever. But I just don't know if they have what it takes to win multiple and make the Super Bowl and really win it all.
Yeah. Like, look, when they won the North, was it 2022? They had
Yep.
a great year, and they march into the playoffs, and they lose to Daniel Jones. I look. There's a very good chance that that happens again, where they not obviously they won't lose to Daniel Jones, but they go into the playoffs and they lose in the wild card round, even if they're favored against the Cardinals or the Falcons or
Yep.
whoever, just based on the magic will wear off because it's like the Vikings are probably the best team in the NFL at winning games, like winning more games than they should because they really shouldn't be winning some of these games, but they do. And then they're going to get to the playoffs and it's all going to become real and then they'll come crashing down. Like, as far as contender, they're not competing for a Super Bowl. They might get to the divisional round. If they do, are you taking the Vikings to beat either the Lions or the Eagles? No. So it just, yeah. I have to say pretender based on that. Packers, look, the Green Bay can hold that dominant win over Dallas for the rest of time in the wild card last year. They went toe to toe with the Niners, who went on to the Super Bowl. They had a great year last year. This year, they look like a solid team. They also should be 6-4 because they blocked a field goal against the Bears, which why they can't keep getting away with this. Like it's the Chiefs conundrum all over again. Why? How have the 2 least liked teams in the NFL won the same way back to back weeks? Like,
Yeah, the Packers have now won 3 consecutive games that the final play was a field goal attempt. They beat the Jaguars and Texans both on last second field goals, and then they block a Bears last second field goal. So again, I don't know how this keeps happening. I mean, honestly, what it really is it just magnifies the gap between how much harder it is for poorly coached teams to upset well coached teams.
yeah,
Like that's the biggest story is that when you are competently run, you can keep beating the odds a little bit and surviving because you just have to let Matt Eberflus blow it. Like that's just what it is. And That Packers Bears game, I was cheering for the Bears to win, but
Absolutely.
their decision their decision to just pack it in and line Cairo Santos up for a long 40-yarder outside in November in Chicago. It's just like this is why it's a loser franchise. Loser franchise, loser coach, loser just management in general. Like the Bears have talented players. They need to get new leadership here because it's just karma. Like they had 35 seconds and a timeout to get 15 more yards and make it a much, much easier field goal where Cairo Santos doesn't have to kick it low because he's worried about the length. Like, go get the yardage needed. The Packers were out of timeouts. It was extremely puzzling management there, and they deserve to have that kick blocked, plain and simple.
The to emphasize how thin the margins are in the NFL sometimes, the Bears are a Hail Mary defense and a field goal block away from having the same record as the Packers.
Yep, they'd be fully in the wild card hunt, and they aren't because the coach is a doofus. What else can you say? Two horrible coaching malpractice moments in both those losses, so they deserve it. As for the
Anyways,
Packers,
yeah.
I don't know, man. Like I will call them generously a contender just because I think they have it in them. We saw them play well in the playoffs last year. They only lost by 5 to the Eagles in a pretty tight game played on the slipperiest field known to mankind
Mhm.
in Brazil in week 1. It was kind of a weird game. Like, yeah, they definitely have the potential if they put it together. I just don't know if they will put it together. Their defense is probably better than last year, but it hasn't really taken the leap that I think some expected it to. Their offense is pretty up and down. The turnovers are still a problem for Love. He's up to 11 interceptions this season, and he's only played like 7-ish games. I mean, it's too much. If he gets it back under control, then maybe, but the way it's looking, they're going to have to go on the road and win 3 games to make the Super Bowl more than likely with the way things are setting up. So it just feels not the right year. I will note that they did win 3 road games the year they won the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. The aura of Lambeau in the playoffs seems to have worn off. So maybe it's good they'll go on the road. But that said, I don't know. I'll generously call them a contender, but right now it's not looking very convincing to me.
Yeah, like you need Jordan Love to play a lot better than he has been playing as far as efficiency wise. And I don't think you can trust him to do that for 3 games in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like maybe you can maybe get one in the wild card round, and I think Packers fans would consider that a win. And then you go on the road to either Philadelphia or Detroit. Look, the Packers will come to Detroit in a few weeks, and I'm sure they'll give the Lions a good run for their money. They could even win, as they did last year on Thanksgiving. In the like the Packers, as we've talked
Sure.
about, they are epitomized by like Jordan Love is the agent of chaos, and you will bear witness to whatever happens on the football field, whether positive or negative. And if it's positive, the Packers just might win a game or two in the playoffs. So we don't really know. Um, as for the other I don't know if I can quite call him an agent of chaos, but he has certainly engineered some wacky wins. Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. Um, Look, they're coming off 2 losses to the Steelers and Eagles, who have good defenses. So I don't want to give him too much flack. That being said, second half of the year, Cliff Kingsbury has always been a thing. And I'm just saying that Dan Quinn coming out in the media and saying, well, Jaden hasn't been practicing enough because of these injuries. As that's the reason they've been losing. How about you get a better offensive game plan that doesn't rely on 45 screens a game? Like, I'm
Yeah,
pretenders. They're pretenders to me.
I think I agree with you generally, and I think just from my experience online and talking to people that Washington fans aren't really necessarily saying like this team is going to make the Super Bowl. Like
Mm-hmm.
they are if they can make the playoffs and win a game, which they haven't done in a long time, that is a successful season. And this is a first-year quarterback. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that they're not quite ready to win the Super Bowl yet.
Totally fine.
To me, the big question, yeah, and to me, the big question with them is the health of Jaden Daniels, because there are issues with Kingsbury in the second half of the year, and I think we have seen some of those. But also watching that game against the Eagles, he just didn't look healthy. Like, he just physically wasn't moving as well. Seems to be affecting his throwing a bit. Just doesn't look right. And if they need to rest him potentially down the stretch, I think that wouldn't be like a crazy idea, because you got the Cowboys twice and the Titans, not and the Saints. Like, you're, even if you lose the Eagles and Falcons game, you've still got a really comfortable path to get a wild card spot. You just need him healthy for the playoffs, and it just doesn't look like he is right now. And if they get him healthy, they certainly have a shot to win a game. I just don't think they have the pieces yet to win 3.
Yeah, like, look, the fact that the likely outcome is the Eagles, if they don't win the NFC, if the Lions end up getting the 1 seed, the Eagles are going to have to host one of the Packers or Commanders. That's a threat. That's a legitimate threat. Whether or not those teams can pull off an upset, I don't know. But they have the Commander, and especially after adding Marshawn Lattimore, they eat all of that cap hit, but he's a very good corner. I think the Commanders are set up for success this year, obviously, in getting to the playoffs. But they're also going to be set up for some long-term success as Jaden Daniels continues to ascend. If you get another wide receiver to complement Terry McLaurin, you're looking good. You're looking good. Like, again, it's a very similar spot to the Broncos for me, where it's pretenders for now with the path to becoming contenders very, very soon.
Yep, I think that's pretty fair.
Now, moving on to the teams that are out of the playoffs and in the hunt, this is exclusively, weirdly enough, NFC West teams. Starting, this is just in order of the standings right now. Rams, 5-5. I don't know.
I'm putting them in pretender bucket. Can they get in? Potentially. Can they win a game? Maybe. I mean, they have Stafford.
Almost beat the Lions schedule last year, so.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the schedule. I don't think they're getting in, just because they've got to play well. They got to jump over somebody, probably like the Packers, to get into the playoffs at the moment.
Cardinals. They got to win the division.
Yeah, they got to win the division. They do have one game against Cardinals remaining at home, but they also have Eagles, Bills, Niners, Seahawks. Besides that, it's a tough schedule. I just don't necessarily think they've got what it takes to get to the threshold needed, and they'll probably get a high draft pick, or a reasonable draft pick, right, like 12th or something, which could really help their franchise after many years of not having high picks. So
yeah,
if they don't make it, it's not the end of the world.
If you go 7-10 and have the 12th overall pick, you're going to be in a very good spot, because Stafford still has a couple good years left in him. So we'll see. Seahawks coming off of a big win on the road against San Francisco. Again, it's the same bucket as the Rams, where they kind of have to win the division.
Yep.
Can they? Sure. Will they? Nope. And even if they do, will they do anything substantial in the playoffs? Probably nope.
Yep. I think that sums it up. Pretender for me. They're such a weird team, because every time we see them, they look like
the best team in the world. Yeah.
And it's like, wow, how does anyone stop this offense? Kenneth Walker really good, Metcalf, Lockett, JSN. Isn't that bad. They got McDonald at DC. This team is nasty. And then you watch all the other games, and it's not like that. I'll give them credit. That was a gutsy win against the Niners. Great drive engineered at the end there by Geno, but it's not lost on me that the light bulb came on after Nick Bosa exited the game. So, you get credit for winning it, sure, but it also just doesn't really pretend well for their possibility to go to the Super Bowl. What my big hope for this team is that they can play NFC North spoiler when they bring Packers and Vikings to town in December in back-to-back weeks. Please give us some wins in that. Otherwise, I think they probably finished like 8-9 or something and missed the playoffs.
So moving on to the last team for this segment, the most interesting team in all of this, sitting at 5-5 right now, the San Francisco 49ers. Okay, their schedule for the rest of the year, just to set this up. At Packers this week, at Bills, versus Bears, versus Rams, at Dolphins, versus Lions, and at Cardinals, who they've already lost to. We've talked about this privately, but there is even let's just say you drop the Bills and Lions game and you're 10-7. That might not even get you into the playoffs. Might not. You also have games, a big game against the Packers this week, and you have. There is no world the Niners could really make the playoffs without beating the Rams and Cardinals both. So you have to win. Probably, let's say you drop Bills and Lions. We can say like obviously those games are going to be competitive, but if they lose those, they have to win the rest of them. But if there was a team to do it, the Niners are that good team that can effectively not run the table, but come close to running the table. So I don't know. I still am wary of them, even without Brandon Ayuk. I still like them as a contender.
Yeah, they're the weird team where they are, to me, a contender that is probably at this point more likely than not to miss the playoffs. And that's a very strange sentence to say, but it's just a truth. The athletic model, which I'm not going to claim is the world's greatest model or anything, but just as an interesting resource. 29% now for the Niners to make the playoffs, and you can see it. I mean, it's a brutal schedule, and the threshold to make the playoffs this year may be fairly high. Wild card looks like you probably got to get to 11 wins, and I don't see them getting 11 with this schedule. So then you're saying, okay, they got to win the West, and again, Arizona could lose that game to the Niners and still get to 10 wins. And I don't know how the tiebreaks would go down. That would be a split, come down to divisional record. And at the moment, the Niners are 1-3 in the division, and the Cardinals are 2-0 in the division. So again, it's a difficult math game. Like the talent is
Yeah.
there. They've still got a good defense. Purdy's fine. McCaffrey back playing now. Juwan Jennings had a great game against the Seahawks. They've got Debo. They've got players. Don't get me wrong. And you look at their underlying stuff. They're outgaining opponents by close to 100 yards, which is again one of the best marks in the NFL. It's all there, but just it's math. It's at Packers. It's at Bills. Bringing the Lions to town. Even that Dolphins game on the road is kind of tricky potentially. Going to Arizona is tricky potentially. That's a tough place to play. Like they are in a fight against time at the moment, where they just might run out of time given how much of this year they spent injured. And it brings to me an interesting question to wrap up the segment. Who are we cheering for between Niners and Packers this weekend?
Niners. I can never bring myself to cheer for the Packers. And look, if the Niners, I don't care if the Niners make the playoffs or not. I honestly would rather the Niners make the playoffs because I want that revenge game in the playoffs. If the Packers lose this week to the Niners, that puts them 3.5 game. Well, assuming the Lions can take care of business against the Colts, that would put them 3.5 games behind the Lions, effectively take them out of the division race, and then you're looking at a wild card team. So, I can't bring myself. I really honestly also wish they played the Vikings again, like later in the year, because they played them early in the year, got by them, and now that's a very a good win for the Vikings. But I kind of wish we could have had the healthy 49ers with Christian McCaffrey play against them so that they could maybe take care of business there too. But the Niners are in such a weird spot because they have a very tough road to making the playoffs this year, and then a tough road to making the Super Bowl at that. They can do it. It's very difficult too. And then you have the Brock Purdy extension looming, which means you can no longer be paying him pennies on the dollar. So like the Niners window might be closing in the next couple seasons here.
Yeah, it was interesting to read the NFL power rankings on The Athletic where they were giving ratings on hot seat for various coaches, and they had Shanahan one notch above, like, cold, right? Like,
Okay.
not saying he's getting fired, but just like there's grumbling in the Niner fan base, and there's unease that something hasn't gone right this year. The pieces aren't there, blah blah blah. It's just interesting world for the Niners to be in. This franchise has been interesting because since Lynch took over, they've generally been really good, but they had that weird dip in the middle, where they go to the Super Bowl right before COVID, then all of a sudden they're bad, and then they're back good again with Jimmy G. Like it and then they move over to Purdy, and suddenly they're the best team. And like it's been a really bumpy ride, and it wouldn't be totally out of character for them to miss this year.
Yeah. So Niners are going to be a very interesting team to watch down the stretch. We'll have to have to wait and see. So now to wrap up the show, we'll get back to the Lions briefly because life goes on in the NFL. The Lions will be taking on the Colts on the road this week, who are coming off a win against the Jets that we talked about earlier. Before we get into that, couple quick updates. We talked about Anzalone out 6 to 8 weeks. If Fatu Melifonwu gets activated on IR, just to be put back on IR because he has a finger injury that's now going to be a long-term injury. We don't know if we will see a Fatu Melifonwu this season. It's as long as Kirby Joseph. Oh, go ahead.
Did he lose a finger in a fireworks incident? Like, what? Carlton Davis breaks his thumb, and he's just playing with a club, and Melifonwu has a finger injury that he can't play for weeks for? Like,
don't know.
What's going on there?
Yeah.
Very strange to me.
It must be rather significant if he's on IR because, like, look, I don't want to question his toughness. Obviously, he has had a myriad of injury issues in his career so far. When he's on the field, he's great. We just haven't seen that nearly enough. So, to be determined if we see him at all this season. As long as Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch are healthy, it's not an issue. If one of them goes down, we might have some issues, but that's a problem for another day. Emmanuel Mosley could return this week. He looks to be on track returning from IR, which would be some extra corner depth. Don't know where he fits into that puzzle. Maybe you waive Khalil Dorsey or something. I don't know. But Mosley was in line to compete with Robertson for the starting slot role in training camp before the injury. So just some extra depth, which won't hurt. But how are we feeling heading into the Colts game? Lions are, I believe, 7.5-point favorites as of now.
I'm feeling pretty good overall. I heard rumors that there may be a Honolulu Blue invasion of Lucas Oil Stadium this week, which would be surprising. Indy's not that far from Detroit. I can't imagine that Colts season ticket holders are that desperate to go to this game. So, that could neuter some of the home field effects. My other thought going to this game, first time we've been in that stadium in 8 years since a classically insane Lions win over the Colts in week 1 of 2016 on a Matt Prater field goal with 4 seconds to go. Hopefully this year is a bit smoother than that, and I think the Lions are pretty clearly favored in this one. Richardson is the interesting thing to talk about. 20 of 32 last week for 272, 1 touchdown through the air, and I think he had 2 rushing touchdowns. Dude is a tank. Like those 2 touchdowns, he lowers his shoulder and just runs over a linebacker into the end zone. He's got that capacity, got a big arm. Feels like this is a game where we will see at least a couple more Lions interceptions, possibly from Kirby Joseph, because he's been a little wild, but they're going to have to contain him, number 1, on the ground. Number 2, going to have to make his life a little uncomfortable. I'm not super scared of their weapons, honestly. Alec Pierce, Pittman, A.D. Mitchell, Mo Alley Cox. Sure, fine. But
whoa, Josh Downs,
really
disrespect.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, he was the next name on the list here. It's just it's not like a CD Lamb is not on this team, is more or less what I'm saying. And
Honestly,
Jonathan
like,
Taylor's a good running.
doesn't feel that different from the Packers room where there's a lot of guys that can play, not a ton of true difference makers. Obviously, they don't have a Jaden Reed, but
Yeah. And Jonathan Taylor's a good running back.
yep.
But they don't have a dominant rushing game by any means. Trey Sermon is rushing for under 3 yards per carry on 47 attempts. And then the flip side of this is their defense is pretty bad by most of the available metrics. 28th in total defense, 28th in run defense, or 28th in run defense, 26th in pass defense. They're allowing 375 yards per game. You look at some of the respectable teams that have played them. They gave up 415 yards to both the Vikings and the Bills. They gave up 497 yards to the Jaguars back when Lawrence was healthy. They gave up 417 to Houston in one of the two matchups. Gave up 409 to Pittsburgh in a matchup. Lions should be able to run the ball, control the game, get most of what they want through the air, and that should be enough to, nerf any potential Anthony Richardson heroic sort of situation, any big plays that he can come up with.
Yeah, for me, this falls somewhere between the Cardinals and Seahawks games where if Richardson looks incredible, then you're probably looking at a bit of a shootout where the Lions are going to have to just stay ahead of things on offense. And then the upside is if he has a bad game like Kyler Murray did in week 3, you control him, you contain him, you force a couple bad throws, and you take care of business. Again, it's not quite like when we were going into the Jacksonville game, we said something catastrophic would have to go wrong for the Lions to lose, and obviously we feel really good about that game. I feel pretty good about this game. Obviously, the odds of the Lions winning are a little bit lower than they were last week, but there's still a good 70% chance the Lions walk out of this with a win. 75% chance. Like, you're feeling pretty good if you're literally the number 1 team in the NFL record and point differential wise. Take care of business. Take care of business.
Yeah. NFL is any given Sunday week. You never really know what's going to happen.
Yep.
And this is at least when you survey the schedule, this is an obvious crap game along with Chicago on the road. Or like those are the two that stand out because the guys will be probably hyped up for Thanksgiving, wanting to beat the Bears, wanting to end the losing streak on Thanksgiving. Then you got Packers and Bills after that. You're kind of looking ahead like, yeah, there's a potential for a game that gets dicey here and you don't really know what happens, but they're definitely better than the Colts. So should be able to get a win, should be able to get to 10-1, but never a sure thing in this league.
I mean, again, like we know the any given Sunday as well as any team in the NFL because in Dan Campbell's first year, the 1-10 or 1-11-1 Lions absolutely throttled the top seeded Arizona Cardinals and started that losing streak that ended with them losing in the wild card round. So anything can happen, but yeah, feeling pretty good. So do you have any concluding thoughts, Alex?
Not really. Just really fun season so far. Hopefully they keep it going, keep the good vibes going. It's a 8 game win streak now, so hopefully it gets to 9 and then we get the short week for the Thanksgiving game.
Yep. So bit of a long episode for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you're consuming this podcast. Make sure you follow if you're on podcasting platforms. Subscribe on YouTube and like the video. And you can find us on Twitter. The show is at Payne and Drain. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. And yeah, go give us a follow. And we'll see you guys next week to preview the Thanksgiving game as that creeps up and review this one as well. So thank you everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers.